Buenas tardes, señoras, señores. Good afternoon. It is a great pleasure for me to introduce this very high-level panel, as you can see, together with our two hosts of the conference, Washington and Chile. It was a great opportunity to be here today, and I have the privilege of delivering a message on behalf of the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Ban Ki-moon. So if you allow me, let me read very briefly what he wanted you to know about his position on this matter. And I quote, "It's a pleasure to greet all the participants in this important event. I congratulate the Foreign Minister of Chile, His Excellency Heraldo Muñoz, and the Secretary of State of the United States, His Excellency John Kerry, on mobilizing such a wide range of actors and concrete actions. This is a defining year for our future and that of our oceans. Governments have adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, transforming our world. The agenda includes a dedicated goal 14 on the conservation and sustainable use of the oceans, seas, and marine resources, testimony to the vital importance of healthy oceans for present and future generations. The sustainable use of oceans is, for example, of great relevance to and underpins the achievement of several other development goals, such as Goal 2 on food and hunger. We know Océano is going to talk about that, I'm sure. Goal 8 on growth and trade, and Goal 12 on sustainable production patterns. In December this year in Paris, governments will seek to sustain momentum with an ambitious and universal agreement on climate change. This is also of critical importance for the world's oceans, since they regulate the climate by absorbing a large portion of greenhouse gas emissions, and because continued increases in emissions pose a great threat to oceans' health and productivity. Sea level rise with devastating effects on vulnerable communities, as we know, Minister from Jamaica is right here in front of me, and these are especially important for those people living in small island development states. Many marine species are also at risk with warmer temperatures and more acidic environment, with consequent impacts on food security. Sustainability requires that we combat pollution, overfishing, and other harmful practices that threaten to exceed the carrying capacity of the oceans, in accordance with, in particular, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. The first global integrated marine assessment was completed this year, providing an authoritative baseline for the future. Next year, a resume review conference will be convened by the United Nations Fish Stocks Agreement. Furthermore, a preparatory committee will start to develop an international legally binding instrument under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Through these and other efforts, the United Nations will continue supporting efforts to enable states, in particular developing countries, to realize the benefits from the oceans in a sustainable manner and in accordance with their international obligations. The oceans are vast, but their capacity to withstand degradation is limited, and this capacity has been reached in many cases. Let us work together more concertedly towards a healthy future for our oceans and lives of dignity for all. I wish you all a successful conference. Here we stop with the Secretary General's statement. Thank you very much. It is my great honor to introduce to you this panel. You know, these are the governments and the intergovernmental bodies of the world. So they have a lot to say. We heard the people already this morning, what everybody is committed and are going to do. But now we need to hear from the governments. Let's see what the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Heraldo Muñoz, who has a very vast experience. As you know, he was ambassador in the UN. He was the head of UNDP for Latin America and the Caribbean. He also headed the peacekeeping, the peace commission, the peace-building commission in New York. And he has a tremendous experience on all multilateral issues. So please, Heraldo, and he's the host, of course, of this magnificent conference. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Alicia.
Thank you, Alicia. As you recall, last July, I was in Washington to begin this process together with John Kerry in the first conference on our ocean. And the very relevant specificity of this conference was committing to concrete actions in order to protect our oceans. And Chile committed to 3 initiatives with regard to which I will now speak. But I would like to underscore that the success of this conference must be measured to a great extent by the results obtained, the number and the quality of the announcements made, and, of course, in relation to the compliance of what is committed. Today, President Michelle Bachelet highlighted accountability. That is, this idea of being accountable, that even in Spanish sounds strange, but far better in order to clarify this idea that we must be accountable for what we do. And this is essential, and I would like to be accountable before you. First, in Washington, we committed to join the New York Agreement of the UN on straddling fish stocks and highly migratory fish stocks. Our parliament, I would like to say, approved this agreement last week, and so therefore will come into effect. And today, before you, we signed the decree for this purpose. We have complied with our first commitment adopted in Washington. To adhering to the New York Agreement will give us more vigorous international tools with which to combat illegal fishing. We will be able to visit, inspect, board, and stop when these ships who are carrying out illegal fishing are even beyond our 200 miles, and that is why this is so important. Second, in Washington, we committed to creating a policy for combating illegal fishing. And Chile, until last year, had only an action plan agreed in 2001, and with a policy that was limited to ports. And for the first time, we've created a policy in order to combat illegal fishing cross-cuttingly, allowing coordinated action by all agencies involved. This policy comprises various aspects related to foreign policy, access and use of national ports, and setting up standards for inspections, control, and surveying of foreign vessels, and some trading measures. This policy has been put together and will be implemented in a transparent and non-discriminatory way, in full conformity with international law. This policy, we believe, is essential in order to do away with disloyal competition represented by illegal fishing, both for our fishermen, yes, but also I believe it could play a crucial role in protecting protected marine areas, as announced by the President of the Republic this morning. The Supreme Decree on this new policy against illegal fishing has been signed, as you were able to see this morning, and its implementation is ongoing. And so therefore we can also say that this second commitment adopted in Washington is on the way to be fulfilled. Regarding illegal fishing, I would like to say that Chile is part of the Commission for the conservation of biomarine resources in the Antarctic, which has always been at the forefront in this area, creating instruments such as documents for catches required to enter fishing products to international markets. And finally, in Washington, we committed to organize the second conference, and we are here. So we have also complied with that commitment taken on last year. Chile is making major efforts in terms of conservation, but we cannot be self-complacent, and that is why, as I said earlier, the President has announced something which is historical for our country, and that is the creation of 2 protected marine areas representing a total area of more than 1 billion square kilometers for protection of our oceanic islands. And with this, we will create not only one of the largest marine protected areas in the world, but also we will by far exceed the target number 11, which mentions 10% maritime territory for each country in areas protected within the framework of this Convention on Biological Diversity. This is historical for us because today we're at about 4.1% of our marine territory so far. But you will see that we have by far exceeded this with just one of the two protected marine areas. The Nazca Desventurada Marine Park will protect a vast area of biodiversity, allowing and ensuring the reproduction of swordfish and also mackerel, and we are sure that the community will be grateful because fishermen will benefit in future from the spillover effect resulting from this protection. With the inclusion just of this Nazca Desventurada Marine Park, we will be able to cover 12.5% of the national maritime territory. And so imagine once we confirm the Rapa Nui protected marine area, we will truly be in an enviable position in comparison to other countries of the world. The Rapa Nui marine area represents a great job and especially supported by the interest of the community in Rapa Nui, the Panel of the Sea and Mayor Pedro Emos Paoa and the teams in the island and the continent that have been working tirelessly to make this aim possible. Our challenge ahead is great because it is not sufficient to merely appoint protected areas. We need to appropriately manage these areas and control so that there in fact be no industrial fishing, so that there is no breaching of these protected marine areas. And so we will continue with this idea of giving content to this designation of protected areas. We will continue to promote also, for example, areas representative of marine protected areas in the Austral Sea. And I must also announce that Chile is drafting a proposal for a protected marine area for the Antarctic Peninsula and the Scotia Sea. We're hoping to have a formal proposal in the near future. Likewise, and finally, we need to move ahead in defining explicitly an institutionality, better institutionality, in order to have an all-encompassing marine policy. And so I would like to formally announce the creation of a council for oceanic policy of Chile that will be in line with our economic development strategy and long-term policies in order to face challenges in relation to protection of the ocean, closely linked to matters of security in general and those related to sustainable development as well. And also the idea is to respond to the need to adapt our institutionality to global, regional, and domestic challenges. The functions of this council will reflect the modernization of our institutional tools in order to guarantee the right of all citizens to live in an area free of contamination, pollution, and safeguard the nature and our environment. Finally, I would like to remind you that FAO adopted in 2009 the agreement on guiding state measures in order to prevent, discourage, and remove undeclared and unregistered illegal fishing. And since then, several have started to begin the ratification of this agreement. However, to date, only 14 countries have ratified this, Chile included among them, and we need 25 for it coming into force. We know that we have about 15 countries that are preparing ratifications, and I would like to call on all countries to ratify this FAO agreement. The government of Chile, the Global Ocean Commission, are convinced that this FAO agreement is an effective tool with which to slow illegal fishing in Latin America and the rest of the world. And consequently, we're making this call in order to form a group of friends of the FAO agreement of 2009. And here is the Secretary General, the Director General, who will give us further details in this regard. And so we would like to mobilize our action in order to promote its rapid coming into effect worldwide, bringing together all positive experience of countries that have already ratified and help those who are in the process or who are assessing possible ratification. We believe that the Global Ocean Commission could be the secretariat of this group of friends. And these efforts should be added to all made at the UN, in fact. And for this, we will actively take part next year at the preparatory conference for the negotiation of the third agreement, binding agreement on implementation on the Convention of the Law of the Sea in relation to marine biodiversity. And finally, I would like to highlight, as several have already said, that I believe this is very important, that our ocean conference should contribute to COP21 in Paris and clarifying the role to be played by a healthy ocean, not only as a gravitating factor in relation to CO2, but as an indispensable aspect of world sustainability, and putting forward issues such as food security, coastal and small island states' interests. And so we believe that this is a major milestone ahead. We have taken a great step at this conference, and now the idea is to continue acting and fulfilling what we say. Thank you very much. Thank you, Heraldo Muñoz. Quite impressive. The program of our Ocean 2014 were 5. One was illegal fishing, combating by 2020, put an end to it, and that is why this is so important. And second, combat marine pollution, acidification, and we've already heard of several measures in this regard, protection of marine areas through national parks or reserves, and finally, how to protect certain key ecosystems. And now I am pleased to introduce John Kerry. John Kerry is Secretary of State of the United States.
But also, he has been in charge of the Foreign Affairs Commission in the Senate for many years. And he has been quite busy, I must say. I can testify for that because he was so busy last week in New York that seeing you here today gives me a great emotion because I know what oceans means to you. And you said very clearly that as a small child growing in Massachusetts and a young man serving in the Navy, oceans became a deeply personal connection to you. And that's how I feel that you are personally committed to our oceans. So thank you very much, sir, for being here. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Madam Secretary General. Thank you for your very personal and generous introduction. And Heraldo, thank you for making it so crystal clear, not only how you personally are deeply committed to this effort, but also your country. And I, again, just want to say profoundly thank you for a very, very serious and comprehensive approach to the challenges that we face here. I'm going to pick up where Heraldo left off, and I'd like to take just a few minutes to outline some of the solutions that the United States is pursuing. And I, again, want to reiterate, as I think I did this morning, we're going to pick up what Heraldo has laid out and work with Heraldo together heading into next year. And one of the commitments that we will make is to bring more countries to the table than were in Washington or here that need to be here. They need to be part of this. And I intend to commit a certain significant element of diplomatic effort in all of my bilaterals and travels through the course of the year to make sure that that responsibility that we're articulating here is broadly shared. As President Obama announced earlier, we are creating 2 new national marine sanctuaries in the United States, one off the coast of Maryland and one in Wisconsin along the Great Lakes. But we also have plans in the works, which we are pursuing, for still another significant one in the Atlantic where we don't have the kind of presence that we want and should. And we're working with senators engaged in that particular area in order to make that happen. We had hoped to be able to get there. We have a few administrative challenges yet to get over, but I'm confident that we will. In addition, we are working to finalize now a new sister marine protected area arrangement with Cuba in order to connect protected sites in our two countries so we can better collaborate on scientific research, education, and sound management. And we met in New York with President Castro. I met again with my counterpart, and we have agreed to meet in Cuba in January or February when we will continue this march towards normalization, but importantly, cooperation on the oceans as well. Over the summer, we joined other nations that surround the high seas area of the Central Arctic Ocean, Canada, Denmark, Norway, and Russia. And together, we signed a declaration to prevent any unregulated commercial fishing in that region. But as I emphasized earlier, and as you just heard from Heraldo, it's one thing to announce these, it's another to make sure that they actually stay protected. And that is, in fact, part of our responsibility to make sure that these prohibitions are enforced. Back in the 1990s, Senator Ted Stevens of Alaska and I joined together to take drift net fishing to the United Nations. You all are familiar. You know, thousands, tens of thousands of miles of drift net fishing would be laid out behind boats, and it would fish and often break off, and then it would ghost fish, which means it would continue to fish, it would get weighted down, it would go down to the bottom, predators would eat, it would rise again and fish again, and this ghost fishing would go on in a terrible cycle of the slaughter. It literally strip mined the ocean. Much of the fishing that takes place today, approximately 2/3 to 50% of the fish catch is just thrown overboard. They don't use it. It goes back into the ocean, but it goes back dead. So we stopped that at the United Nations. But to my chagrin, it's one thing to have stopped it in name at the United Nations and another to have the enforcement in the areas where on the open oceans it still goes on. And so we have rogue fishermen from certain countries particularly, and we know who they are, and we need to engage them very directly, and there needs to be a new era of responsibility regarding this, and a new era, by the way, of naming and shaming and of accountability. I think we owe it to people to give them notice first, but thereafter, we need to hold fishermen who still use drift nets accountable. And all of this has to change. How? How will it change? That is part of our commitment going forward. There are three major ways that we believe we can improve high seas enforcement: increased tracking and surveillance, better technology, and more effective international cooperation in surveillance and apprehension. Today, I'm pleased to announce some of the steps that we are taking in all of these fronts. Last year, we announced a program to track seafood from harvest to production to entry into U.S. ports, so we can know for certain that seafood sold in our country is legally harvested. Later this month, we will officially launch that program's first phase in operation, which will trace several marine species, including shrimp, cod, and tuna, that are especially at risk of being caught illegally or mislabeled. And tracking this initial set of species will help us to prepare to track all seafood sold on the shores of the United States by 2017. We're also proud of a new initiative in the Asia Pacific called the USAID Oceans, a 5-year, $20 million effort to promote sustainable marine fisheries in and to help monitor seafood fraud in that part of the world. In addition, the United States is investing in technology that will help us get a better sense of human activity in even the remote parts of the ocean. We're enhancing the sensors on our satellites to detect the kind of night lights used by fishermen to attract fish, which will help us identify and stop potentially illegal or unsustainable fishing practices. We've already demonstrated this technology in Indonesia. And next year, we will begin implementing the system in 5 pilot countries, along with training and technical support for local officials. But one of the most important changes we can make is to deepen the level of overall international coordination so we can identify, interdict, and prosecute those who pursue unacceptable fishing practices. Today, various nations are working hard to track and address illegal fishing, but the fact is, no nation is currently capable of policing the entire range of the oceans. On the other hand, we have an obligation to make certain that no square kilometer of ocean is beyond the law. We're determined to try to do that. And we're going to use this next year to build that towards a broader system that can be in effect, hopefully, as we come out of next year and into 2017. With that in mind, I am pleased to announce the launch of a new initiative called Sea Scout. And Sea Scout is aimed at integrating all existing and emerging technologies for use all over the world and linking responsible entities and agencies around the world. More broadly, its goal is to enhance coordination, information sharing, and capacity building from pole to pole and across the equator. And we will start by focusing on regional hotspots, part of the Indian Ocean and the Gulf of Guinea, for example, where IUU fishing is known to be most rampant, and where our respective enforcement assets can be most efficiently directed and deployed. Already today, New Zealand, Palau, Chile, and the FAO or others have said that they will join Sea Scout. And we obviously are going to invite every nation to become part of this integrated effort, which in a world of virtual reality and instant communication is absolutely plausible. The more international partners involved, the more successful it's going to be. So I urge all of you in both the public and the private sectors, get involved in whatever way you can and help to think about the ways in which certain technologies and practices can be put to use so we can marshal the forces of law enforcement communities around the world to actually make these laws have greater impact. I'll just quickly share one last important project the United States is undertaking in the coming year. We're investing more than $500 million in a new U.S. Ocean Observatories initiative. We're commissioning a system of moorings, gliders, and autonomous underwater vehicles equipped with nearly 800 instruments to collect data such as pH, oxygen levels, transmission of carbon dioxide between the ocean and the atmosphere, and concentration of phytoplankton. And we'll be putting all of the information that we collect online, much of it in real time, so that the public or anybody who wants to can better understand ocean acidification and other changes taking place, and ultimately better address and adapt to them. Now, these are just a few of the many new projects that we're working on. You'll hear about others as the conference continues. But in closing, let me just say that as we go into next year, obviously we want to build on this, and I cannot say enough about how impressive what Heraldo has done and what Chile has done to get us where we are today. We all need to build on it every year. Long after I'm Secretary of State, I hope we will be coming together to celebrate the success of all the work that we have done through years. But we cannot put anything on the back burner as we leave here. We have to go to Paris, as Heraldo said. We have to continue to use every opportunity. And I know there are several others waiting to make their commitments known, and I want to hear from them, but I can't thank everybody enough for engaging in this. This is really critical to our responsibility to future generations and to ourselves. And I thank everybody for taking part. Thank you.
Thank you very much.